On the 9th of August, the people of Kenya headed to the polls to elect the candidate that will head the East African country for the next 5 years. From 4 candidates who were competing for the top seats in Kenyan politics, it went down to 2 names, with Deputy President William Ruto emerging the winner at the presidential election. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission chairman, Wafula Chebukati, said Ruto had won almost 7.18 million votes, 50.49% against 6.94 million, 48.85% for his rival Raila Odinga in the August 9th vote. After the results were announced, the president-elect vowed to work with all leaders in Kenya, adding that there is no room for vengeance. The outcome was a bitter blow for Odinga, the 77-year-old veteran opposition leader who had the weight of the ruling party behind him. Joining us on the show this morning as we review Kenya's presidential election and what Nigeria can learn from Kenya's electoral process is Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, Nigeria's former Minister for Foreign Affairs. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, Ms. Abiola.
Good morning, Prof.
Dr. Abati, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us. Well,
And Mr. Rufai Oseni, good morning.
Morning, sir. Good to see you again, sir.
well, let's go straight to business, Prof. What's your reading of the just concluded general elections in Kenya and the emergence of William Ruto as 5th president of the Republic of Kenya? Elect for now, yes.
It was the best of times and it was the worst of times for Kenya and for Africa. If you watched the scene that came out of Nairobi yesterday, you will feel sorry for the Kenyans and you will feel sorry for all of us in Africa. The riot that broke out at the Collation Center, where the result was supposed to be announced, the police had to be brought in, blows were exchanged, guns were drawn, batons were brought out, chairs were flying all over the place, reminding me of that terrible scene in the Western House of Assembly in, was it 1962 or thereabouts. This was after everyone had praised the process up until that point. Secondly, you had 4 dissenting members of the commission, the Electoral Commission. Never heard of that before. Even our own case here that, we belabor all the time, we've never had that situation where the majority members of the commission went to have another press conference before even the official results were made. I feel really very sorry for Kenya, especially because of what we know about the history of elections in Kenya, the violence that usually accompanies the announcement of the result. You will recall, Dr. Abati, that Kenya will be the first African nation where a sitting president and his vice will be dragged before the International Criminal Court of Justice on the grounds of fomenting violence, ethnic cleansing, and what have you. The first one, and the only one, by the way, so far. So really, I feel terribly, terribly sorry for Kenya and for Africa today. Having said that, let's analyze the consequences of the results of that election. One must congratulate William Ruto, the deputy president, because he took on a sitting president. He took on the dynasty, the ruling dynasties in Kenya. the Kenyatta government, the Kenyatta family, the Odinga family, the Moi family. He took them on. He took on the establishment itself, the civil service and what Trump usually calls the, what does he call them now? The underground state or what have you. He took on the intelligence community. He took on the press. And he still won the election. He deserves our congratulations. This may mark the end of the dominance of those dynasties in Kenya politics and the bringing in of the youth, the young people, even though he's 55 years old. But when you compare it with the age of the dynasties, those families, it means a coming in of the youth. It marks the power of the people, because Ruto was able to win by the whiskers, by the way, by the cat's whiskers. It was not a landslide, but he managed to win by tapping into the power of the people, the power of the street. Don't forget that his classic campaign thing was he was selling live chickens by the roadside in order to finance his own education and the education of his siblings. In other words, he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He came from the Moi once described him as boy of the paupers when he came out of the university and decided to campaign. So he came from amongst the people. He was not amongst the elite.
Right, and he also credited his successor to his policies, to his manifesto, and not ethnic configuration, as we've seen in the past. I'd like a comment on that, because we all know that was a huge factor in previous episodes of electoral violence in Kenya, unfortunately. And how likely is it that he can deliver on those policies, his bottom-up economics?
Well, Ruto was clever, but he also was being clever by half. He also played the ethnic card by selecting a Kikuyu as his running mate. So also Odinga, who's also selected the Kikuyu. You see, the Kikuyu is the powerhouse of Kenyan politics. By both of them selecting Kikuyu running mates, they inadvertently split the votes of that powerhouse. So, because usually in Kenya politics, wherever the Kikuyu went, so did the electoral result. So he also played that card. He shouldn't tell us that he wasn't aware of the consequences of picking a Kikuyu running mate. Having said that, yes, you are right. He came up with a manifesto of, as he put it, allowing wealth to grow from the bottom up, rather than what usually happens in politics. Politicians all over the world always promise to deliver the moon. Whether they actually ever deliver the top of the trees, I doubt it. Because, see, the vested interests in Kenya political system are so entrenched and are so strong that a president, no matter how powerful, and we found that in Nigeria, you depend on the civil service. You depend on the public service. You depend on the business elite to run the country. You cannot overhaul all of this. Hopefully, even if he delivers 10% of the manifesto in the sense of bringing into the system 10% that was out of the system, I will really credit him with success. I've often, even those that we call successful leaders in the world, how much of their manifesto are they ever able to deliver? They end up blaming Congress, or blaming Wall Street, or blaming the establishment for not being able to deliver all that they promise. Don't let us expect too much from Ruto. It's gonna take 5 Rutos, in other words, 5 presidential elections following the same bottoms-up politician before one could say you will overhaul the Kenya system. Don't forget this. One of the criticism made of Ruto is that he's a very corrupt politician. That he came from nowhere and yet is one of the richest land-owning politicians in Kenya. How did they make that money? Well, he says he can account for every Kenyan shilling in his account. But then that's what they all say. But I don't. I'm not going to take him on the source of his wealth. All politicians, again, I must say, all politicians are the same. If you get a politician who is a billionaire, he cannot have clean hands. It's simply not possible.
All right, sir. Good to see you again. But, I was taken aback when you said it was a victory that for the end of dynasties, that he beat the Moe dynasty, that he beat the, probably if you want to add to it, Odinga dynasty, that he also beat the Kenyatta dynasty. But I'd like to break down the facts. And what are the facts? This same man, his third name on Google, nickname is Mr. Corruption. This same man was an ally to Daniel Arap Moi, former president of Kenya, just after Jomo Kenyatta died. And when you were asking, how did he get all the land he owned? We all know that arguably Daniel Arap Moi owned most of the land, grabbed most of the land to himself in Kenya during his presidency. And he was a close ally to Daniel Arap Moi. Is it a triumph against the legacy? Not quite. Because when you check the ownership of a media station called K24 in Kenya, it is owned by the Kenyatta family and Ruto. Is it a triumph for, a man grass to grace? Not quite. Because a lot of people are even speculating that Ruto and Kenyatta might have connived to even do this and make it seem like they placated Odinga with Kenyatta supporting Odinga because they know their end game. So is it truly a triumph for the people or a case of don't die in their war? Because Ruto, with his big hotels in Kenya, like the Dolphin Hotel in Mombasa and other hotels, is as complicit as the other guys in there. So is Kenya really free?
Well, you are right in the point that you've made. But see, our analysis now is becoming the two-handed economist. On one hand, this, and on the other hand, that. The point I was trying to make is probably for the first time in the history of Kenya, we are not going to have a Moi or a Kenyatta or Odinga in the State House. You are not going to have people who were pillars of the nationalist movements,
the Mau Mau,
who were authorities of their own. The Mau Mau movement, you know, whether you are from whatever, you are having a new breed, but not a new breed in the sense of a saint. In any case, a saint can never win an election, not anywhere in the world. Whether you are a Kennedy with their dad's alliance with the mafia, or you are a Trump. Well, so far we don't know about Obama, whether Obama has any skeletons still to be dug up. But in Africa, he marks, or in Kenyan politics, he marks a new departure. Hands clean? No, obviously not. You need money, and you need a lot of it to win an election, in an African election. But he won by, again I will repeat it, whiskers of a cat, 50.5. He barely squeezed through to even avoid a rerun. And when you say, there's been this speculation that actually the Uhuru Kenyatta with his foxiness might actually have arranged this cliff-hanging electoral victory for Ruto. I will say this. My sources in Kenya indicate that those 4 commissioners who challenged the official result that was announced was actually a game plan by Kenyatta to rubbish the election, because they were his appointees. One needs to be careful about how he is supposed to have got these 4 people to act the way they acted. But I draw your attention to the fact that practically all analysts who are not Kenyan, by the way, said these 4 commissioners are going to have a hard time before the Supreme Court, because the portals were open from the electoral whatever you call it, where those things were signed. All the agents in each of those electoral places signed that form attesting to the result, and that was sent straight in to the computer, and that the portal was made available to anybody and everybody, including the average Kenyan who could. So where then did these 4 get this opaqueness with which they charged the chairman of the Electoral Commission? It is being suggested that actually this was part of the plan of Uhuru in order to derail Ruto. So I wouldn't buy into this suspicion that actually Ruto's electoral victory was arranged by Uhuru. I don't think so. I think grace of God on the part of William Ruto to have won this election. But he's still part of the system in terms of wealth. He couldn't, a poor man is not going to win an election anywhere, not even in Nigeria. You don't. You need money to win an election. And so I wouldn't use the fact that Ruto has wealth to say, to deny him the sweetness of his victory.
Well, Prof, William Ruto says there is nothing to fear no room for vengeance. Can he be trusted? Underscore. And then what's next for Kenya? And is this the end of the political career of Raila Odinga after 5 times trying to be president, and the end of the dream of a Luo presidency?
Well, Dr. Abati, I think right now, today, Kenya needs a lot of prayers because violence has been a constant figure of not just the electoral process in Kenya, but the politics of Kenya. Remember Tom Mboya, probably the first political figure in the history of Africa to be assassinated, and till today there is still big question marks. Incidentally, I'm not saying that the colonial powers did not assassinate people, I mean Lumumba, etc., etc. But everyone knows that Tom Mboya was an inside job by the Kenyans themselves. And then the riots that had always followed the disputed election results. In Nigeria, we had election results disputed. It goes to the Supreme Court, and we make all the usual noises, and then people start preparing for the next election. No, even as of yesterday night, some of the pictures that were coming out of Nairobi, then the Kisumu, which is the area, the strength of Odinga, I'm sorry,
Raila
Odinga family, has already shown evidence of violence, and that worries me. And I think African leaders, Western leaders need to call on Uhuru Kenyatta, because as the outgoing president, he still has all the powers to deploy security forces to show now he's going to be neutral when it comes to security. I think we need to pray for that, and we need to ensure that if Kenya gets through this and Ruto is sworn in as the president, Kenya will continue to be the regional hub for stability in that part of Africa. Its economy is not as bad as the economy of some of the other big powers in Africa that we know. Therefore, it is still possible for Ruto to start off not from the ground, but from how far Uhuru had gone in maintaining the economic progress in Kenya. Kenya is not going to be immune, by the way, from what is happening in the rest of the world. I followed you earlier this morning when you were showing some irritation that, people will always say that, Nigeria is also, the victim of what is going on in the rest of the world. And you are, showing that there were sufficient reasons why Nigeria should be doing better than it is doing and should stop laying claim to what's happening in the rest of the world and taking cover under that, which I understand. I can buy into that. But Africa, unfortunately, is going to be and is already suffering from some of the things that are happening economically in the rest of the world. It's now going to show the wisdom and the capability of the leadership, the Ruto presidency, as to whether he can stop a slide by Kenya due to other factors that may be coming in from other parts of the world.
Well, assuming that there will be a Ruto presidency, because this schism in the IEBC does suggest a foreshadowing that there will be a court battle. Odinga's spokesperson has declared the declaration of Ruto as president-elect as illegal and invalid. Odinga's running mate has said it's not over till it's over. There have been reports of one neighborhood that's an Odinga stronghold, people chanting, no Odinga, no peace, and burning tires. It's all looking somewhat unpleasant. What's your prediction? Do you think that William Ruto will be sworn in spite of this drama?
Yes, I think so. Let me stick out my neck. I think so. Because the electoral system as designed and as implemented is so transparent. Everyone, even there was a commentator sitting in London who said he had, electronically queued in to the results as they were being released, and that he found, and this was an Englishman, by the way, not a Kenyan, that he found no shenanigan at all. So I cannot see overturning this election, because on what grounds will it be? You see, the reason why Odinga did not show up at the center where the results are supposed to have been declared is that even his own camp already had the result. Everybody already had the result. So they knew what was going to be announced. So, but one cannot. I'm not a lawyer, you are, Tundu. So the games that lawyers play and the games that judges play, they may find a technical ground for knocking out the election and ordering a rerun, as they did in, was it 2017?
2017.
But it will be incredible. It will be an incredible judgment. I think I have sufficient confidence in the integrity of the Kenya judicial system. 3 of the judges of the Supreme Court, actually, I know them. But then power changes people. But I think I'll stick out my neck and say there will be a William Ruto will be sworn in. If any attempt is made to overturn his election, that will plunge Kenya into a deep abyss of violence, the type of which will remind all of us of what happened that led to this same Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto being dragged before the International Court of Justice. And let me add that actually it was on technical grounds that the 2 of them, that the trial did not proceed, because the prosecutor said those whom before had indicated a willingness to give evidence had now changed their mind quite wisely, because you go and give evidence in Brussels against your president and the vice president. In what country are you going to come back to and hope that your life will be safe? So it wasn't that they were not found guilty, but it was because witnesses withdrew their preparedness to testify.
What role do you think that a certain Wafula Chebukati will play in the history of Kenya? Just another public servant that serves as the chairman of the IEBC, but decided to make a decision by making it possible and public for everybody to see the servers as results came in. President-elect William Ruto called him the true hero of the elections.
Yeah.
What role do you think Wafula Chebukati will play in the history of Kenya?
In a way, I don't think any of us really know sufficiently the intricacies of the Kenya political system to give a definite answer to that. But if I were Ruto, and the justice of Kenya becomes vacant, I don't know the constitutional provision, so I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff now. He will be a good candidate because he's shown a man of integrity who stood up again to the president. He again stood up to the establishment. Even as far as, thank God, the Constitution gave him the power to sign the certificate, to make the declaration, and did not stipulate that that declaration must be based on the majority of votes on the commission. He gave him that power, and he exercised that power. But already, he is, I do agree with Ruto, that the chairman, is already a hero. And it's just to build on that. And it gives you that in any system, you will always find maybe one person who will stand out. And the survival of a nation may depend on the action of that one person. I know a tree does not make a forest. That's what we say. I've argued on this program that actually I could quote instances where one man's decision makes a whole difference and change the course of history. So to that extent, I think Kenya needs to be proud of the chairman of the Electoral Commission, and let us hope. Again, there are elections coming up in Africa, and let us hope that people will draw the right lesson from what's happened in Kenya and show the same courage. The same courage. That even if that is all they achieve in this world, delivering a credible election, they've done their bit. And that will be sufficient to be credited to them.
Okay, Prof, I guess you are right. Henry Gibson, in An Enemy of the People, says, yes, there's nothing wrong in standing alone, and an individual can truly make a difference. Hubert Humphrey, former U.S. Vice President, said more or less the same thing. But I wanted to ask you, what's your assessment of Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy? He spent a maximum of 2 terms, 10 years as president of Kenya. How will you describe his legacy?
He has disappointed me, honestly. First of all, when the Supreme Court, let me just go back to one, the allegation of his role by the International Criminal Court for the violence that happened after the election. That's one. Two, when the Supreme Court ordered a rerun of the election that brought him to power, the language that he used against the Chief Justice and the justices of the Supreme Court was so foul, so uncouth, so unbecoming of somebody of that caliber, somebody of that pedigree, somebody who aspired to lead the country. I was shocked. Look, in Nigeria, yeah, we've had our cases that have gone to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has taken a position, one way or the other. I have never. And there were people who disagreed with the ruling of the Supreme Court. But I have never heard a Nigerian politician use such foul language against judges of the Nigerian Supreme Court as Uhuru did against the members of the Kenya Supreme Court. He also dipped his hand in the kitty, like presumably all African leaders. So I don't think anything that he did to me has wiped the slate clean of this negative aspects of his character. And finally, don't let us forget why he and Ruto fell out. It's because Ruto opposed Kenyatta's attempt at constitutional amendment so he could run for a third term. Again, the course of third term. That's why he and Ruto fell out. No other reason. So, but if even at this last stage, at this late stage, he were to now say, fine, the people have spoken. The avenue is the Supreme Court, but I will maintain peace and order, and I will crack down on any attempt to take Kenya to the abyss. Maybe history may be kind to him, but if he keeps quiet, so far he has not congratulated Ruto, which he should have, because the body set up to conduct the election has declared Ruto the winner. He should have congratulated him, in spite of the fact that he opposed him. But he's kept quiet, and in some circumstances, keeping quiet is as bad as being complicit to negative tendencies. So I'm not today, as of today, I wouldn't give, if I was signing a certificate for Uhuru, I don't think it would be positive.
Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you very much, Professor Akinyemi, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed.